In this video, I'll show you guys a relatively easy and very accurate way to transfer a graphic design from one side of a vehicle to another. When it comes to laying out a design, whether I'm doing a graphic or even a traditional flame job, I'm still very old school in that I prefer to grab a roll of tape and just go to work by hand. It takes a little bit of time and you will waste some tape during the process, but in the end I think you get a better result because your design is more tailored to whatever vehicle you're working on. So I know this is just a test panel, but imagine for a minute that this is the side of a vehicle. And we've laid this design out and now we need to replicate it on the other side of the vehicle. So how do we go about doing that? So what I'm about to show you guys is also a very old school method for doing this. It's been around for years and years and years. And in my opinion, it's still one of the easiest and most effective ways of transferring an image from one side of a vehicle to another. It doesn't require any expensive tools or materials. In fact, it starts with masking paper. You can buy masking paper for relatively cheap in large rolls and varied widths. So you could cover the entire side of a vehicle if you needed to. So to begin with, I'm going to cover this panel with a piece of masking paper. Just loosely. Now at this point, if we were actually working on a vehicle, we would want to find registration marks so that we can line it up on the other side the same as it's lined up on the side that you're working on. To do that, you can use a panel gap or the wheel arch lip, whatever you can find. For this, because this is a panel, we can just use the edge of the panel itself. So next, I'm going to take a crayon. And just like in grade school, you take the crayon and you go over the design. Along with the edges for our registration. Just like that, we now have a copy of the masked off graphic. So from here, we'll take this down and we'll go to the bench. Now that we're on the bench, you can see I'm just using a cutting board underneath this tracing. You can use a piece of cardboard or anything else that's got a little bit of give to it. And from here, I'm going to use a Pounce wheel. The Pounce wheel has a little spur on the end of it with spikes so that you can trace over your design and put a dotted line right across that where you've taken it. You want to be careful and not press too hard, because if you go too deep, you'll just cut the paper altogether. You won't have the dotted lines, it'll be completely cut. So, but I try to trace down the center of each tape line, and that gives me a pretty good idea for when I go to re-tape this design for where I need to be. I prefer the 14 TPI, which is teeth per inch Pounce wheel. I'll leave a link in the description where you can get these, because the 14 teeth doesn't tend to cut the paper like the finer ones do. But I'll go through and trace each one of these lines that need to be masked again on the other side of the vehicle. And then we'll have a good road map. For the next part of the process. You want to make sure you get all of them. To check, you can run your finger over and you'll be able to feel whether that line's been scored with dots or not. For instance, that one right there I missed. So we have our new pattern, and I flipped this panel over so that we can simulate the other side of the vehicle. So to put the pattern up, we don't want to put it in the same orientation as we had on the other side of the vehicle. If we were actually doing this on the opposite side of a vehicle, we would want to flip this over. And then we line up using the registration marks. This paper is thin enough that I can see through it. And then I'll tape it in place. The next part of the process involves a Pounce bag. This is just a canvas bag filled with blue chalk. I've looked, and apparently they don't make these anymore. I've had this one for, man, I don't know how many years. You can buy a Pounce pad, which is, it looks like a plastic or a wooden box that has a bag attached underneath it that holds the chalk in there. I don't know how well those work. I've never tried one, but this is not rocket science. You can make one of these out of an old sock. I'll leave a link in the description below to the blue chalk that I use, or if you're working on a dark background, baby powder works great. But just cut the sock to whatever length that you want, pour your chalk in, wrap the end with tape so you kind of have a little bit of a handle, and all we're going to do is pounce through all the perforated dots we have on our pattern. Sometimes it helps to rub over it just to make sure you're pushing the chalk through the perforated lines. You can lift it just to make sure you haven't missed anything. We haven't. So we'll put that down and we can remove our pattern. And now we've got a great pattern to work from to mask off the design on the other side of the vehicle. All right, I've washed the chalk off of my hands, so now I can start masking this off. Now remember, I tried to keep the perforated lines in the center of the 1/4 inch tape before, so when I tape this off, I want to try to keep those lines in the center of the tape. once you have the basic graphic masked off, then you can mask over the top of that for individual colors, and it's ready to spray. There are so many different methods for transferring your art, whether you're talking about graphics or artwork in general, onto your canvas or substrate, whatever you're working on. But rather than trying to cover every single method in one video, which would take a while, I decided to start a new series. So this will be the first video in a series on just how to transfer your artwork onto whatever you're working on. If you guys are interested more in the automotive side of things, I highly recommend Craig Fraser's book, Automotive Cheap Tricks and Special Effects 2. Craig Fraser has been in the industry for a very long time. He's one of those guys that I've looked up to throughout my entire career. I've learned a lot from his books, his videos, and his articles in Airbrush Action magazine over the years. I'll leave a link in the description below to his book. Check it out if you're interested. Thanks again for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and share if you got something out of this, and I'll see you guys next time.